Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Just testing here. We're going to wait a couple of minutes. Hello, 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 everyone. And welcome to our third session of Up to the Challenge. Every session will host guests that highlight the different SDG themes covered at the Financial Time and SDG Challenge. I see that people are joining already, and it's really great to have you with us today. So feel free to drop a line in the comments to know where are you connecting from today. Awesome. I'm going to give a couple of more minutes, and then we're going to start with our today's theme, that is reduce inequalities. First, before starting our conversation, I want to talk about a little bit about reduce inequalities. We know that reduced inequalities and ensuring no one is left behind are integral to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Inequalities within and among countries is a persistent cause of concern. Despite some insights and signs towards reducing inequalities in some dimensions, COVID-19 has deepened existing inequalities, hitting the poorest and the most vulnerable communities the hardest. It has put a spotlight on the economic inequalities and the fragile social safety nets that leave vulnerable communities to bear the brunt of the crisis. So, if you're innovating to reduce inequalities, working with migrants, vulnerable communities, justice issues, or gender-based inequalities, you can apply to our Financial Times and SDG Challenge through this link. And if you have any questions about the challenge, feel free to drop them in the comments. So now let me introduce myself. My name is Cristina Fonseca, and I am the Partnerships Manager for the Asia Pacific region at SeedStars. Today, I am connecting from The Hague in the Netherlands. And I am extremely happy because I will be interviewing Aline Sara, co-founder and CEO of Natakallam. It's my pleasure to be interviewing her to understand about more about what Netakalam does and how they leverage the free digital economy. So if you have any questions during the discussion, feel free to drop the questions to Aline in the comments too. So now, let's welcome Aline on stage.
Hi, Christina.
Hi,
I guess we're
Aline.
on the same time zone then. It's a
Yes. I'm super happy to be here with you. I'm super excited, and I think that we can start our conversation there. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and about Netakalam?
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for having me, and hi everyone. It's amazing to see where everyone is joining from. So diverse. So my name is Aline, and I am currently in Paris. I'm originally from Lebanon, and I was born and raised in New York City. I actually have a background in human rights and conflict resolution, and I actually worked most of my life as a journalist until switching to social entrepreneurship. So that is a quick nutshell about me.
Oh, and can you tell us a little bit more about what Netakalam does and how did it all start?
Sure. So Netakalam means we speak in Arabic, and it's a social enterprise whose goal is to provide income to refugees, migrant populations, as well as host communities, basically people who are in countries that are hosting millions and or large numbers of refugee populations. So we provide them income through the digital economy by leveraging their native language skills and hiring them as online tutors, teachers, translators, and cultural exchange partners. So the idea for Natakallam is dates back to 2015. So I was back then in New York City, and I was just looking from afar the situation in Lebanon, which is a neighboring country to Syria. And millions of Syrians were fleeing the horrendous civil war taking place and coming to Lebanon, so just crossing the border. And these individuals, actually, what we don't always realize and understand is when they flee the conflict, when they flee the immediate violence, that's really just the beginning of the journey they're about to face and the challenges that they're going to deal with. So in Lebanon, Syrians are typically not given a right to work. And yet, and just, to note the number of refugees of Syrians in Lebanon, it's about 1 out of 4 or 5. So it's a very significant number. And Lebanon is one of the countries with the highest density of refugees worldwide. So not only they're not allowed to work in the local Lebanese economy, but the chances for these individuals to get resettled to a country, typically a country in Europe, Canada, the US, North America, where they're accepted into the country, given a right to work and to restart their lives, the chance for that to happen is actually less than 1%. And that is why back then we were seeing this massive wave of migrants, this migration route that was starting from the Middle East on its way to Europe. And so I was, watching this from afar. I was in New York City. I was also sensitive to my country's history. Lebanon is a country that's had a civil war. Lebanon is a country that was already struggling in 2015 and now is struggling at a whole other level due to another revolution in the Arab world that has failed. So I was telling myself, well, I can understand that it's tough for them to get a job locally. What can we do that is not going to take any work away from the local population, but that can also provide opportunities for refugees? And that's when I had this light bulb moment because I was looking for ways to practice Arabic, which I don't speak very well, from my home in New York City. And I realized that, I can't go practice Arabic in Syria or in the region because I'm stuck in New York. But these individuals have had to flee their homes, and they're also connected because we live in an era of the World Wide Web, which is very different than what we were living in at the previous refugee crisis of World War II. So combining these factors, I just kind of had this light bulb moment, and I was just like, what if I hired Syrians in Lebanon to be my tutor? So that they can teach me Arabic. I could get to know them because I think it's so important to meet individuals, to understand what they're going through, why they fled, et cetera, create this kind of bridging and understanding. And so I get, affordable, flexible Arabic language practice, and they get income. They get to make a friend and, just no longer be passive recipients to aid that we hear about so much. So that's kind of when I had the idea. I pitched it at a couple of competitions. And what really launched Netakalam, actually, because we didn't win any competitions back then because we were too young. But I shared about Netakalam with my network. I asked people to post about it. And when the photo of the little Syrian boy who was washed upon the shores in Turkey, I don't know if you remember that, but that was a key moment that raised awareness around the Syrian refugee crisis. So right around that week, we were trying to push Natakalam in our networks. And when there was a blogger who shared about Natakalam, and the whole world was waking up to the refugee crisis with this photo of Ilan Kurdi. And then within a couple of days, we had about 300 people signing up for Arabic classes with us. And that's what launched us. So that was back in 2015. And ever since, we've been running the organization and have expanded in the type of language services we offer, the refugee communities we work with, the languages, and so forth. So that was a bit long, but I hope it gives a good background.
No, I think it's great. I think it's great. When I was reading about it, when I knew about Natakalam, for me, it stood out that you are building bridges. It's not just learning about the language, is just also learning about the culture. You're learning about the people, and it's a great way to connect. It's a great way to connect. And in this digital era, what is the best that you can do? Is connect with people. Yeah. So now that we're talking about the topic on reduce inequalities, how do you think that you're supporting, how your startup is supporting this specific SDG goal?
Well, I mean, of course, the most basic goal of Netakalam in its origin was providing access to a livelihood, a pathway to an income to a population that is full on barred from the local economy. So, if you can imagine what that must be like, you've fled your home, you've left everything behind, and you come to a country where you can't restart your life. You're not even allowed in many settings. Some countries do grant the right to work, but especially in the Middle East, in that setting, that wasn't even feasible. So, of course, if you are a refugee, you're it's, of course, you're going to go further and further into the negative balance of lacking access to an income, in addition to having lost everything you already had. So the first thing we should do, in my opinion, is actually find ways to make sure individuals who've been forced to flee and who've lost already everything are back in the wheel, are back in the system to start regaining their lives. So, I mean, it can't be more direct than that, to be trying to work towards reducing that inequality by creating a system, by creating this market where individuals who can't get a full-time local job employment, well, there's this second best thing, which is kind of this freelance digital economy and option. And, now that we're living in the era of COVID, and even before this whole trend of being digital nomads, well, I always say this, but refugees are forced digital nomads. They should have first dibs at these opportunities, because unfortunately they're in this limbo status. And as this limbo status lingers, the inequality and the lack of opportunities, the lack of income access, the lack of support just exacerbates itself. And one thing that refugees will always say is such a part of their day-to-day life and experience is this waiting to get your file read by UNHCR, waiting to be, able to, get on a boat or get on a plane to potentially get resettled, waiting. And at least with this system, there's, a way to kind of cut that waiting by giving them this opportunity, which is not this traditional opportunity of like a work in an office or a work in an agricultural setting, but it's really this on the go digital type of opportunity.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important that we understand that. And now, what will be for you the biggest discrepancies that you have seen when working on this SDG, reduce inequalities, with people from different countries? And what are like the most prominent challenges that you have faced when working with migrants?
Well, when you are with no papers, when you have no identity and recognition in a country in which you find yourself, try and see how much you can get done, right? I don't think, maybe there are members of the audience who have been in that situation. I'm not aware of everyone's background here, but I've certainly been blessed to not have had that myself, but I see what it means every time if we're working with someone who is in this transitory state, in this moment of trying to, you don't have access to a bank account, you don't have access to an address, you don't know how long you're going to be staying here. So just starting with that, this fact that, you can't even legally job hunt, right? That was one thing that hit me when I was back in New York City, because I had graduated from my master's and I was job hunting. And that's when I was also thinking I'm going to work on my Arabic because I have all this free time and I'm job hunting. And it was very kind of sobering when I was thinking, well, I'm kind of miserable. I'm job hunting. No one likes to be job hunting, right? But I was thinking to myself, but it's actually a right. It's a luxury to be able to job hunt when compared to a refugee or a person who is not legally given this right to work in a country. So, when you don't even have those basics, the inequality is just so ingrained and so present. So there's such a number of level of things we need to do, which is from the legislation perspective, from the policy perspective, from the creating different economies that can include displaced persons and migrants. So they are, the inequality that they are dealing with is so acute. And of course, it varies by countries. So our focus was typically the Middle East region with, Syrian refugees, but also Iraqi, Yemeni, Palestinian, political refugees from countries like Egypt, The Lebanese population now is working with us, and some of them are fleeing for political reasons, etc. And each country and each region varies. So for Venezuela and for Latin America, it is a little bit more reassuring to see that neighboring countries to Venezuela have opened their doors to refugees, are giving them, in certain circumstances, a right to work, which is one step further to decrease these inequalities. We also work with Francophone African refugees who find themselves sometimes in neighboring countries or have made it, for example, to Uganda, which is also a country that is allowing refugee populations to work. But even for refugees who do that migrant route, who take this route and risk their lives, pay thousands of dollars in smugglers, they'll get to Italy, they'll get to Greece, they can get to France. And there, it will take months for their case to be studied, accepted, and in the meantime, they're cut off from the local labor market again. So the level of challenge when it comes to migratory populations, to refugees, to migrants, to economic migrants, there's a lot of, those words are thrown around, and it's themselves are a debate on how you call certain individuals. There is so much to be done, and I think that hopefully our work contributes in a minor way. But it's a big problem.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And on a more impactful perspective, through the past years, what is the impact that you're most proud of that you have achieved with Netakalam?
So, I can start with a couple of numbers because people like numbers, and numbers help.
Go for it. Let's give numbers to people.
So we're a social enterprise that has chosen to grow in a very kind of slow, steady, safe way, because we don't want to gamble on people's lives and livelihoods. And sometimes startups go very fast and things can go astray.
Mm-hmm.
But we've kind of taken a slightly different pathway, and I think it's also specific to social entrepreneurship. And so to date, we've been able to disperse over $1.4 million in self-earned revenue to our workforce of tutors and translators from displaced backgrounds. We have been working for almost 6 years with over 200 individuals, and some of these individuals have been with us for 6 years, have been getting a monthly income through Netakalam, and have literally built their lives or restarted their lives through this income that they've made. Some more specific examples includes individuals who, through their classes, through their one-on-one teaching, which is truly what I think most of the refugees we work with say is the most powerful, is this human interaction, right? Refugees are not performing a service behind a computer screen. The screen is just a bit of a kind of a way to get to another individual. And there's nothing like human connection. There's nothing like human interaction. And interestingly, there is a great, I think, TED Talk by a refugee from Syria. I think I'm blanking out, but his whole theory is that you lose your social capital when you're forced to flee a country. And social capital is really everything, right? When we talk about networking, when we talk about going to events to meet people, when you lose all that network you built your whole life, that's another level of loss as a displaced person. And so through Netakalam, because the dynamic is that you have one-on-one sessions, you get to meet people, you become friends, we're seeing incredible types of relationships that are being forged. So for example, we have refugees who got other jobs through their students, other freelance jobs. We have refugees who, through their students, were able to connect to different NGOs and networks of resettlement, and were able to go from Lebanon to Italy and get resettled, which is their ultimate goal, to become someone who has asylum status, refugee status, and can restart their lives. I've had stories that I heard through the grapevine that, one of our refugee tutors, their laptop broke down. Mm-hmm. And their laptop is their lifeline right now because they teach through that laptop. Well, I found out that their student shipped them a laptop, which is something I had no idea about. We have students who are sending wedding gifts or baby gifts to their tutors wherever they are in the world. So things like this that is so human, so touching. And, which really is, I think, part of what needs to be done, because we need a systems change. We need, the migration issue is fully tied to politics, to fear mongering, to using refugees, migrants, immigrants as a scapegoat for political means, going towards much more populist regimes. So sure, we can provide jobs to refugees, but we also need to change people's minds. We need to make sure people are not afraid of refugees and immigrants, and realize that those individuals are heroes. Those individuals enrich a society. And so I think that is truly what I'm most proud of for Netakalam, and I think our team is that there is a very holistic type of work we're doing, which is not just the financial component, but it's, again, changing the narrative, building bridges, and very, very specific bridges that in and of themselves lead to really powerful results. And we do our programs in schools and universities, and we have our refugee tutors who will Skype into a classroom of 4-year-old, of 5-year-olds, of 6-year-olds who might be, a Syrian refugee based in Iraq who Skypes into a classroom in Kentucky, USA, where these individuals will never have the chance to meet a Syrian, but only hear about them through the news. And frankly, the news, unfortunately, doesn't really paint the best image of refugees, especially when you listen to certain news outlets. So, I think these are the things that are the most heartwarming and the most reassuring. And it's small, it's bit by bit, right? It's steps. But yeah, I think that's one of the great things about this work.
I just want to mention again something that you say, and it's about like how a person lose all this social capital, and how is that important when you flee a country, right? How the human interaction is so powerful, that people are seeing numbers, but they don't realize also that it's bigger than the numbers. It's also the impact that it has socially to an individual and to a society in general, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's extremely important. My next question was about success stories, but I think that you mentioned a couple of them. I think that was very beautiful. Like, you don't expect that someone is going to ship up a computer to you, that someone is going to develop this kind of relationship, that you're not a tutor anymore. You became a friend. You became a part of a circle. I think that's very beautiful. And since you're working in the field of reducing inequalities, how do you think how urgent is that people innovate in the field? And I know people like numbers, and I know people like money. And what is the impact, the economic impact of it?
I mean, so what is the economic impact of what we're doing from an innovation perspective? So Netakalam is operating in this kind of blurry line of like, tech for good and startup and language platform, but its origin, and very much what we consider ourselves, is almost like similar to the work that NGOs do on the ground to provide, the more traditional way to provide income to refugees has been in agriculture, in more like this type of physically bound type of work, which is more, it's not necessarily the type of work that individuals who had a background in computer science, or people who used to be teachers or doctors or lawyers or architects or journalists, right? Because these are the type of people Netakalam is currently working with. So with the innovation and the innovative approach of Netakalam, when we compare ourselves to the aid sector, the more traditional aid sector, we are, first of all, of course, grounded in market needs, which is, we were born because there was a supply of very skilled, qualified, connected refugees looking for work, not for charity. And this booming language market on the other end, whether it's online language learning, online interpretation, cultural exchange program, and ed tech that goes into this type of cultural exchange. So that's the first thing. We're grounded in market needs, which then enables us to be more sustainable and self-sustainable. The other aspect is, again, I mentioned it before, it's not charity. Charity has its benefits. And I believe that aid is critical in emergency settings when, you have fires to put out, immediate needs, food, shelter, etc. But when a crisis becomes protracted, which is what we're seeing with these refugee crises. It's been now 10 years since the Syrian conflict, right? And we have Syrian refugees in Lebanon 10 years later. We have to think of more long-term solutions that kind of go from the emergency aid to development. And so Netakalam is actually a solution that is in the long run, that can support people years into it. And that's why, as I mentioned, we have tutors who have been with us for years and actually have become really kind of, this is their lifeline, their stable lifeline. The other thing is because we're a startup / social enterprise, we're not bound by the bureaucracy and the complexity of more large bureaucratic institutions that rely on donor plans that have to kind of abide by certain schemes that are framed over several months, several years. As a smaller enterprise, as an enterprise that has like the startup mindset, we can be much more nimble. We can be small and then specific and then look to scale. And I think these are really important things to have and to kind of think outside of the box. Because otherwise, when you're tied to rigid implementation frameworks that can be sometimes in the typical aid sector, it's harder to actually find that deeper impact. So I think, those are a couple of things that speak to an innovative mindset and to taking risks. And of course, it's funny because when we work with NGOs, we really see sometimes how complicated it is to take certain risks because it doesn't follow certain legislation, certain regulation. And it's funny because when I was launching Netakalam, my lawyer friend told me, he's like, don't talk to lawyers, just do what you want to do. Do not talk to lawyers. And I think in the startup space, that's kind of known. So I think that's, it is good to have that freedom and to not be bound by these frameworks sometimes. And then you realize you've discovered this kind of blue ocean, right? And yeah.
Okay, we have a couple of questions from the audience. How did you choose the language that you operate with?
So our approach to languages has been based on our understanding of the region from which the tutors are coming from, as well as the need. So we were born with very specific, it was Syrian refugees in the Lebanon context. It was focused on Levantine dialect, which is the language, the dialect of Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Jordan. We quickly expanded in the Arabic sphere because there were different dialects. But then because we were realizing that a lot of the Syrians we were working with, for example, in Greece or in Turkey, we were coming across a lot of Iranian and Afghan refugees. My co-founder is originally from Iran, so we have a good familiarity with the region. So then we decided to add on Persian because we could also relate to and understand the situation. And what I mean by that is that when we are hiring refugees, we understand a bit about, the complexities of the conflict they're fleeing. We have a background, my co-founder and I come mostly from a political science background. We also have an understanding of very kind of subtle things like religion, political tension between communities that has helped us as we grow our business as well. After Persian, we chose to launch Spanish with mostly Venezuelan and Central American refugees and displaced persons. That was also decided upon the fact that there is a large demand for Spanish, much more than Persian. And of course, the emergency of what was going on in Venezuela, notably, but also at the American border. We're actually both, and a big part of our team is Francophone. We're based in France, and we've also worked in Francophone Africa. So then we also decided that French would be the next language. So when we launch a language, it's really a combination of factors. It's being sure we understand the context in which we're working, trying to also make sure that there's a demand in the market. And based on these things, that's how we decide to proceed. And, it's very different than if you look at, Duolingo or Verbling or other platforms where it's a catalog of languages, right? I don't think you will see the same level of culture as if you look at Netakalam social media, where we really go in depth into expressions that you'll hear, for example, in Lebanon, or an expression that you'll hear that's, you know, a Latin American expression. So that's kind of a slightly different approach that we've had than other language platforms.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting to mention. I'm from Nicaragua, so for me it was very interesting to see the approach that you have at Spanish, because you know when you're speaking with people in Spanish, it's always like you will have your certain slangs, you will talk in this perspective, and it's, you know, when you learn a new language, you always want to learn from the locals.
Yes.
You always want to be able to learn from the locals and understand the culture. So I think that it's a very interesting approach that Natakalam has.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one more. How do you reach the tutors, or how do they reach you?
So great question. So when we first started, because of our background, again, of my co-founder and I coming really from the kind of, you know, human rights, journalism, international organizations, local NGOs, we collaborated with NGOs on the ground, and they would refer candidates. But also, the truth is that within the Syrian refugee community, they you know, there's 10 million displaced Syrians. So you can imagine there's millions of them who are looking for opportunities, who are connected. So there was a lot of word of mouth among themselves and also within the NGOs. As we progressed and went on to other languages, it really became much more of a reliance on working with NGOs on the ground, working, for example, informally with UNHCR that would refer candidates, for example, notably Venezuelans, working with, you know, other organizations like the International Rescue Committee, Save the Children, all of these different organizations, both the large, very famous ones, but also the more local ones. So that's typically how most refugees and future tutors and translators find us. And they also find us online because, you know, refugees are like us, right? You know, when you're looking for a job, you're going to ask your friends, you know, where should I apply? Do you know if there's any openings? Can you put in a word for me? Like, you know, we tend to, you know, use this word refugee and think of it in a specific way, but the individuals we're working with do have that kind of, not all of them. We really do work with a variety of profiles, but many of them are also just online looking for ways to get resettled, to potentially take the migrant route and find a way to navigate through the different options and you know, smugglers or how to, you know, to find a way to get income where they are. So that's been how it works. And, you know, we do like a normal interview process. They share their CV, they send a small motivation paragraph or letter, and they'll go through an interview, they'll go through a small training. And we do all this, bearing in mind, of course, the circumstances and the situation where they come from. And when we hire, there is a, you know, holistic approach to where's our impact going to be strongest, but where are we also able to ensure we can bring in a certain amount of, you know, skills and qualifications to ensure the quality needed to deliver a service that is being paid for. So it's this delicate balance.
Okay, this sounds very good. We have one more. What are you doing to build the community and to keep it alive with the online reality?
Yeah, so
all these questions are very good. Kudos to our audience today.
So we are, you know, in the recent past, we've really tried to hone in on our community of tutors and translators. Our workforce, if I can say, they're, you know, based in 25 to 30 countries, I would say right now. So of course it's, you know, it's an interesting experience from, you know, we have Afghans who have fled to Indonesia, and then we have, you know, of course, we have Syrians in Brazil. So it's really, you know, the time zone, et cetera, you know, as for everyone who now works online knows that that's a challenge. But what we're trying to do is actually really create a community among all of our tutors and translators by creating virtual coffees and meetups between them, but also between them and our staff. We try to during COVID, when it was especially hard, we offered sessions of laughter yoga that was actually taught by one of the tutors. So also leveraging their skill set to try and create more opportunities for them, try and create upward mobility. Some of our tutors have become part of the staff as well. We tried to do fun things like online trivia. We tried to create all these resources for them to use. We have some really fun virtual meetings where like the Syrian is telling the Venezuelan that he wants to learn Spanish from them. It becomes very funny when we have the whole community online. So, as much as, of course, we're a small social enterprise, we have limited resources, but we do try our best to create that sense of community, and our head of community actually says that it's not even community, it's a feeling of family that most of our team feels.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. The Natakalam family. I think that's great.
Yes.
And what can we expect from Netakalam in the future?
So, well, we are continuing to try to deepen our current offerings and provide much more compelling user experience, because that's actually been one of the areas we're not as strong, because we're not really a tech at the core. We're a tech as a means to a human core. So we're working on our platform still. We're trying to study all the different features we can put in to make the learning experience more engaging from the tech perspective. We will continue to explore adding languages. We're looking into Portuguese. We've explored also potentially Mandarin, a couple of others, but it's still very kind of something that will happen in a bit later on. One of the big things we're really trying to boost is our translation and interpretation services, especially the virtual ones. So because that's a great opportunity as well, beyond just language teaching, for these individuals to access an income. And it's just really exciting to collaborate with big organizations that have a large need for translation or virtual interpretation, and to know that this is going to go straight towards supporting displaced persons. And I would say that another area we're really trying to push is our community sessions, which is really bringing these opportunities for people to hear refugee stories, to hear about their journey, to hear where they are, what they fled, why they are where they are now. And we're really pushing that now in the corporate space as well. So it's called Refugee Voices. And so it's done in a group setting where one of our tutors is sharing their journey, and then opens it up to a Q&A and shares, their biggest challenges, their hopes for the future. We've done that a lot recently with Afghan tutors and refugees, who, of course, now it's been in the news with the withdrawal of the US. And we have one of our tutors who used to be an interpreter for the French army and had to flee because of the Taliban pursuing him for that, and how he ended up, he was in Iran, then in Pakistan, and now in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, he was incarcerated for 2 years. So just, it's so sobering and humbling to hear these stories. And it's also just, the news can be really, we hear it all the time, but we really believe, and this is coming from someone who used to be a journalist, that there's really just nothing like hearing the stories from the source and asking questions directly. And we've seen what it creates. So that's another offering we're doing. And we do that. And whenever it's done, income goes as well to the displaced individuals, so that, we love running to refugees to hear their stories, but given how much challenges they're dealing with, it's nice to also compensate them for their time.
Yeah, I think that's telling your story is one of the most powerful weapons that you have. And I'm really happy that you're doing that too. If people wants to know more about the organization, or, like someone here right now is hearing all about this and want to work for Natakalam, how they can reach you, where they can find this information.
So we have a Facebook page that you can write to. Our website is natakallam.com, and there's our contact info. You can send an email to info@netakalam.com and you'll hear from our team. And if it needs to get to me, it'll get to me. I'm just not, as responsive because I've just become a mom. So for those who don't hear back from me, if they try to reach out, that's probably why. But we're usually pretty easy to find.
Congratulations on being a new mom. Right now, Seed Stars with the Financial Time and SDG challenges, we're scouting people who can, propose innovative solutions to reduce inequalities. Right now, Netakalam is working in a very specific niche. What is your opinion on other areas that are urgent to address and reducing inequalities?
I mean, I feel like there's overlap between all the different areas that need help and urgent attention. So, I think that any type of innovation that is speaking to reducing or trying to turn back on climate change, because climate change is going to actually lead to 150 more million climate refugees in the next 50 years, according to the World Bank. Any type of work that is, going towards ensuring human rights can be respected, providing opportunity to people who are marginalized, anything that can help, avert war and conflict, which is so often at the source of all of the work that we're doing. I mean, there is a flurry of areas that need support. And I would say if we had to really bring it down to a couple of areas that I think whatever you do there, it will, kind of interact and help each other out. I mean, there's climate change, there's issues related to migration and displacement, issues related to conflict resolution and peace building, also, changing certain, like issues related to labor laws, to, access to education. I mean, access to education is massive, because if you don't have the education, it's harder to actually go in and to create these changes. Reducing the gender gap, of course. It's I can't even pick an area. I think that all of them are relevant. If you have a solution and an idea that can speak to any of them, I think it's worth pursuing, and there will be a ripple effect.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And you, as an entrepreneur, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
The question that's always at the end of an interview that I always answer, probably not as most people would expect the answer. So I fell into entrepreneurship. I did not know what a social enterprise was when I thought of Natakalam. My passion was activism, human rights, journalism, conflict resolution. So I actually never had that, dream of becoming an entrepreneur. And sometimes I, look back and I'm like, wow, how did I get myself into this? For me, it is about change. It's about impact and change. And whatever means to create deep impact that is in tandem and in complement with what's out there. That is, to me, what is most critical. And what do I mean by that? There's a glorification of the entrepreneurial journey, and it's not easy. It's very hard. And sometimes I think that it's almost better to innovate within a larger setting, or to collaborate and to make sure that you're not reinventing the wheel. And sometimes I feel like I see this in the entrepreneurship space. And so again, for me, what it is about is to make sure that, sure, you have an idea. If the idea exists already, partner with that person. Bring in your thoughts, their thoughts, capitalize on that, maximize it. Partnerships for innovation. I forget, there's one of the SDGs, which is about partnerships. And I really am happy that that's one of the goals, because what we need to overcome in terms of global challenges is so massive that it's not about you, me, my project, my enterprise. It's really about bringing everyone to the table and seeing where you're good, where I'm good, what you've already done, and I can do something else. So that's kind of my biggest recommendation to people who want to become entrepreneurs or have an idea, is to first make sure that it's not out there, and that, you know, you're launching yourself into something that is truly unique and innovative and going to make an impact. And if not, because I'm all about social change, if the goal is social change, then find what you're great at, find what someone else has already done and is good at, and work with them to meet your goal. And so I know it doesn't directly answer the question, but if you want to give to the more like cliche answer of, you know, being an entrepreneur and just go for your dreams, I would also advise against that, because it's a very difficult journey. I am a privileged person, and I come from a family that migrated from Lebanon. My family was accepted. We didn't have to be refugees. My father was able to become a doctor, and, you know, raise my brothers and I safe and away from the violence. And we got all these opportunities. And it's because I have that I was also able to do what I'm doing today. And I'm very aware of that. So I would say, you know, those are just a couple of things to keep in mind. And at the same time, it is incredible to see what certain entrepreneurs have done and from where they come from. And of course, you can always find, you know, exceptions to, you know, sometimes what you think is the more common profiles in the entrepreneurial space. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that makes sense.
No, I think it's a great advice. It's a great advice. You make more impact by partnership with people, by getting together with people. I think that's a great advice.
Well, you're the partnerships manager.
Yeah. Of course, the partnerships manager would say, let's partnership together. That's how we create more impact, right?
Yeah.
We have one more question on the audience. How can we keep the refugees communities sustainable, reducing the continuous aid?
Well, I mean, that's a very big question. And it's, you know, every country is different. Every refugee story is different. Everyone has a different background. So I think there's a lot of legislation and policies that need to be examined and changed. We must also really review the way resettlement takes place. Because, you know, it's just, for me, it's just incredible. I mean, my parents left Lebanon. There was a civil war. They came to the US. They were welcome. They immigrated. They were able to do what they had to do and to restart their lives. But that's no longer the case. We are living in much more xenophobic worlds. Politicians are constantly using refugees as a scapegoat, as I mentioned, creating fear. So I think there's multiple levels at which we can create change for refugees. In a very basic way, you can start donating to organizations that are doing charitable work with refugees. You can go and find out where are there organizations that are hiring refugees, because there's more and more organizations and enterprises that are doing that. If you can choose between, if you're part of a company right now and you know procurement, well, you know, you can tell them they can consider Natakallam for their translation services rather than another corporation that is, you know, more traditional translation company. You know, so there's a really big push in certain areas to hire refugees, so you can look into that. You can also, whenever you hear someone, it's not even just refugees. Whenever you hear someone talking about about someone from another country in a negative way, I mean, we're all human, right? We all know that we should, you know, change that narrative, whether it's, you know, based on religion, on sexual orientation, all of that, anything that's creating this fear of the other is also critical to helping to alleviate the situation for refugees. And and I think if you're in a local community, finding out where the refugees who are arriving and what do they need to start their lives again. There's you know, so much that can be done. I mean, I think, was that the question? Did I not answer it right?
That's good. That's good. No problem. That's good. That was a good answer. And your last question will be, if you can share a message to the audience on this topic, what will that be?
On reduced inequalities or on refugees?
On reduced inequalities, that is the SDG theme topic of this session. What would that message be?
My message would be that there is always something that can be done. I think that the more we change our lives to take care of ourselves, but also think what can be done for the others, I think that will just is bound to help reduce inequalities, and any type of altruistic work that can be done, any type of, I mean, even from our habits from the climate perspective, right? Because again, I mentioned climate is going to be one of the biggest drivers of migration in the next few years. Natural disasters resulting from climate, for example, are going to drive millions more people into a displacement status, right? So really anything from our daily habits to getting involved with organizations, to thinking of where we're sourcing, what we're buying, where we're buying from, all of these things will contribute. Responsible consumerism, all this stuff, I think, will help to try and reduce inequalities, and also voting. Vote. Be active in your, in your political spheres. Find out who is presenting themselves, what their agenda is. That all will contribute to reducing inequality.
I think that's a beautiful message to finish. Be more active. Be more active in politics, and even the smallest thing that you think can help to reduce inequalities. So it was my pleasure to interview you today. Thank you so much for your time, Aline. Thank you for this very interesting and eye-opening session about reducing inequalities. And I hope that you'll also join us on a future sessions today. A future sessions with sisters.
Thank you, Christina. Hope you have a good night.
You too. You too.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Aline. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to say a little bit more because I want to talk to you about the Financial Times and the SDG challenges. This year, we have partnered with the Financial Times to give the Sisters World competition a new twist. So we have 6 SDG thematics: gender equality, good jobs and economic growth, good health and well-being, quality education, climate action, and that was today reduce inequalities. So right now, the call for applications is open. And we're looking for seed stage startups to apply for these 6 themes. The deadline is on November 1st, so you better hurry up. And if you know someone that is, working with these topics or is very interested, please make sure that they apply too. Startups can win up to $500,000 in investment and 3 months enrollment to our Sisters Growth program, as well as visibility package from the Financial Times. So if you have any questions or comments on the competitions, drop them in the comments right now. The Sisters team is going to answer that. Here is the link. You can see the link and apply now, or you can apply to this call for applications. And don't hesitate if you know someone or if you have a startup that focus on these themes, please make sure to apply before November 1st. We're going to wait a couple of more minutes here to see if you have any questions. I didn't see any more questions from the audience. Well, but if you have any more questions regarding the SDG challenge, make sure to contact Sisters, contact Cristina.fonseca@sisters.com, or anyone that belongs to Sisters will be very happy to help you. And thank you so much for your time today. I hope that you have enjoyed the session. And remember, as Aline said, every small thing that we do can help us to reduce inequalities. So I hope that I see you soon. And remember, sign up for the challenge.